Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're going to talk about the occasionally thorny but arguably increasing in necessity subject of cloud storage costs. And given that the two big brands in the world of network attached storage, Synology and QNAP, have now both rolled out their own partner hybrid cloud platform that works in conjunction with their own hardware bare metal NAS solutions, I think now is about time for us to compare these two platforms, because maybe you're an existing or a potential Synology or QNAP buyer and you're thinking about having their own services, keeping it all first party and allowing yourself to have both an off-site cloud backup and your local bare metal backup all within the same branded ecosystem. But before we go any further, a few disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, I'm surrounded by lots of test machines. We're coming up and I'm close to the first third of December. I'm trying to do loads and loads of tests for the channel, and consequently I'm in real close proximity with a lot of the hardware that I'm testing. So I apologise if a lot of that hum and the clicks and whirs comes through there in the background. The second thing, in the past, whenever I've talked about the subject of cloud here on the channel, when I've talked about off-site backups, the brand that I've talked about more than any other when it comes to off-site backups is traditionally Backblaze. One of the reasons I've talked about it, as you can see here on screen, is the cost. The cost of Backblaze compared to anyone else out there is generally quite low. But I would still say that even though Backblaze is low, Synology and QNAP's platforms are actually cheaper in several ways than Backblaze. So don't think just because I'm talking about Synology and QNAP's own respective cloud platforms in C2 and myQNAPcloud 1 that undercuts anything I've said before about using the Backblaze B2 cloud system. A lot of the time the pricing, and we'll talk about this later on, isn't so much about the data you store. It's going to be coming down to the downloads, because I think a lot of users still aren't aware that when you're doing these large amounts of data storage in the cloud, the storage of the actual cloud space is half of the price tag. The other half is downloading it. Now, this is generally known as egress. There's ingress and egress of data, and when you do need to pull that data down, a lot of cloud providers will actually charge you based on the capacity. Now, there is such a thing as fair usage downloads that we'll talk about later on that is scaled against your overall capacity. But as you can see here, if we zoom in just a little bit more, you can see the Backblaze there, $14,400 per annum. And that is if you wanted to download 200 terabytes from your 200 terabytes storage there. But if you wanted to download more, again, it scales against your cost of overall data. And the same goes, the more data you store, obviously, the more you're going to have to pay for that cloud storage there, which brings us to Synology and QNAP. Here on the left, the Synology, on the right, the QNAP, and their respective cloud platforms. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about pricing, I'm going to be talking about feature sets, what sets them apart, what are their unique selling points, where they are in the market, and ultimately help you understand, if you're not already on one of these ecosystems, which of them best suits your needs. So, let's talk costs. Let's be honest, I've already banged on about money and the price of things. That's going to be a really interesting point for a lot of users out there. And if we focus on the old wonga, the old cha-ching, the old money in the bank, I'll say right now, pricing is actually pretty close on both of these. So if we start there with the Synology on the left hand side of the screen, as you can see, they're charging in dollar, they're $71.99 for the basic package per annum, and that is based on 1 TB of storage. So already it sounds like quite a lot, right? On top of that, if you go to the advanced package, that's when you move into the business model. You get access to hybrid share, something we'll talk about later on. But this allows you to scale up that data quite substantially there in terms of capacity. Now, this is going to be a very interesting point later on. But even if we bring back that comparison from earlier with Backblaze, and we looked at 200 terabytes of data, if we move back into that and go back to our 200, and we make sure that the monthly download is 200, you can see $14,000 for Backblaze, and Synology $13,200. It's not a huge, not a tremendous price difference there once you're really scaling it out over the data. Now, the reason I brought up that 200 terabyte there is because it is also worth highlighting, and QNAP have been very, very clear about this, that their cloud platform right now in myQNAPcloud 1 is still technically in beta. They've only rolled it out at the midpoint of 2023, and I think it's still going to be in beta for a little while yet, and you can get access to some free storage space, something we'll do some comparisons on in just a moment. But once you break down into the pricing there, you find out two things. Number one, their pricing is a little bit more gradual and broken out into what you can get. So again, if we go into the licensing structure there for the QNAP cloud storage services, you can see if we break into the individual tiers that 1 TB is going to cost you $60 a year of storage there. Again, that's less than the $71.99 that we were seeing there. And of course, it is a discount. How real that discount is, we're not sure. This is QNAP's own store. But even if we go into one of these little discounts and these little modular packages that you can go for there, it is also worth highlighting that currently, at the time of recording, they only go up to 20 terabytes currently. Now, I'm sure if you got in contact with them, they would be more flexible about that and afford you more space. But that means that if you do have serious enterprise scale storage, at least now at the time of recording, for their beta, you can't exceed that 20 TB limit. And for a lot of users, 20 TB, it's just not going to cut it at the enterprise sector right now. Now, obviously, if you're an enterprise user, you were probably never going to go for something in beta. So at the moment, at least in terms of overall capacity and pricing, I think pricing is cheaper on the QNAP, but it is worth highlighting that it's still in its beta phase. And the Synology there does bring out, because it's been around in the market, I think close to 3, maybe even 4 years at this point, C2 does bring you a larger available capacity overall. Now, when it comes to, entry-level pricing, if you want to experience the product, Synology's platform has got 2 different introductory offers. So on the Synology side, you can get a 30-day free trial of access to C2 storage, which is their more general, large kind of block storage area. Or alternatively, you can look into the C2 object storage, which is a more traditional file folder breadcrumb level storage, and you can access to an introductory level of that data storage. So if you go in, this is the more traditional data storage that you would see. You get the free 15 gig that you can assign to your Synology account, and once you've done that and logged into your Synology account, it then adds you and gives you access to that object storage there, which allows you to access it just like you would your Google Drive, your Dropbox, your whatever. Now on the QNAP side, as mentioned, you can get hold of 16 gig, so 1 extra gig of data on any of your machines, and that transposes itself, as you can see, in the myQNAPcloud UI, which allows you to sort of see your storage and browse through it in a file folder level. You can upload it to standard file managers like, again, your Dropbox, your Google Drive, whatever. And if we compare them side by side, you can see that creation of storage areas on these 2 platforms is ever so slightly different. On the QNAP side of things, once you've signed up to that free 16 gig of storage out the gate, it immediately creates that space for you. And then from there, you can go in to that space that you've created, dig in a little deeper and play with some of the settings. So some of the settings with regards to versioning are something you're going to need to do if you want to go out of the free plan, which is a real shame that you can't access that in the free option there. And again, the expiration policy, I should highlight that both of these cloud platforms have an expiration policy that if you miss a payment, you have 30 days, in which after that they will start deleting your data. So they don't immediately delete your data if a payment is missed with those subscription services. But the fact that the versioning isn't available in the base level plan or the trial is a real shame there, to give people an idea and a little taste of just how good that versioning and the history of that data is. Lifecycle policies there with regards to what you want to happen with your data long term. If the data is going to be overwritten, a lot of those versions and more are all built into it. Then you can create those policies custom out of the gate. Moving forward from that, you've got recycle bin policies there, what date will be held for a given time, and finally access to the whole storage area. And uploading data directly into that storage space is available very easily, and we'll be doing a performance test on that later in the video. Now, on the Synology side of things, when you set out for the first time, you will need to create a storage bucket. So if we go ahead and create a new one here, we'll call this one NAScompares test, can't use a capital letter. From there, create an access key if you want to. Then if we're going to be enabling versioning, remember we are still using the free trial 15 gig space that they've offered us there. And of course, we've got support of write once, read many. Now, it's going to be very hard to compare a fully fledged established cloud platform that's been in the market for a few years versus that of a beta level cloud platform that's rolled out right now. So we have to at least give QNAP the benefit of the doubt there. But nevertheless, we have to say straight away, some of those base level features being included inside the trial storage space there, it's going to be very appealing indeed, and I like then the object storage side of things. Synology have rolled that out, and indeed when we're talking about the object storage, it's worth highlighting that when we look at the price comparisons between those cloud platforms we mentioned at the start of the video and those cloud object storage versus general block level data rather than the object, the price savings are actually even better there. But continuing where we were, we can go ahead and create the retention policy there in terms of write once, read many to ensure that data is not easily amended or deleted to protect from things like ransomware. But go ahead and create that bucket, not unlike when we create a shared folder on a Synology NAS system, which now allows us on x86 and above models to create write once, read many shared folders with support of Worm. That there, and we can see, as you can see, you've got that. So it's a very similar creation policy with their cloud storage area and those storage buckets as we've seen before in terms of their shared folder creation there. And again, we can create ourselves a new folder, call it test2. Sorry, I'm leaning over my microphone there. And all of this is being created within the browser window there and that in native file manager there. So again, that's good that we've got access on both the local NAS level there, and of course, they're now visible on our object storage. And of course, if we went into the full C2 cloud, then you can go for the larger kind of block data overall. So overall, a decent little feature set, and I would say the Synology one definitely has the edge in terms of that design overall that we're seeing there. Now let's talk about how you interact with these cloud services within the NAS you own. You've bought your Synology NAS or you've bought your QNAP NAS and you're thinking about how it's going to interact with it. This time we'll start on the Synology side of things, and on the Synology side, probably the one that's spoken about the most, and I alluded to it earlier on, is Hybrid Share. Hybrid Share allows you to bolt on a cloud storage space, in this case the C2 only. You log in with the C2 space, as I'll do now. But of course, as you see, as we've mentioned earlier on in the video, you can only utilize that if you are using the advanced higher plan. You're not able to take advantage of that on the free tier there, and certainly not on that more basic plan when we're looking at the comparing of the prices there between the two of them. But I will say with the object storage, and particularly when you are looking at bolting on storage, Hybrid Share is going to be one of those premium applications, because what it does is it will allow that cloud space to appear local. It will look as local as any of the other data that's already on your Synology NAS system, and therefore interact with it with all of your Synology proprietary first-party apps there. Now, if you're not interested in doing that and you want to really segment and separate the cloud, but you still want to utilize it in your platform, probably the two main ways to do it, and not the only two ways I will add, is Hyper Backup, where you will be able to create a synchronized space here between individual files and folders on the system or LANs. Go ahead, select the C2 storage area there, and then you can interact and connect those two services in order to utilize it just like you would any other supported cloud provider in Hyper Backup, and back up the content of your NAS automatically onto the Synology cloud. It is encrypted back and forth, and that is obviously going to be done over the internet remotely there. On top of that, you can utilize other applications such as Cloud Sync to once again synchronize with that cloud space, less in a backup sense, but more to allow external users to interact with the cloud space, and then the cloud space will be synchronized with the NAS, adding a couple of degrees of separation between those remote users and your primary storage area. Once again, just go ahead, click that. If you created that access key earlier on in the bucket name, go ahead and enter those details there, and you'll be able to create that synchronized area on your Synology NAS between the cloud space and your bare metal NAS. Finally, as you've integrated that C2 object or classic C2 space onto your system, you're able to interact with it in those proprietary apps we mentioned earlier on, such as bigger ones on the active backup scene that will allow you to interact and integrate that into your existing backup strategy across your client devices locally and make those backups furthermore backuped in your 3-2-1 backup strategy thanks to integrating that Synology cloud. Move on forward, once you've bolted on a lot of those storage spaces using hybrid share or some of the other synchronization tools, you can then start integrating it into Synology Drive and therefore make that cloud space accessible on your local system thanks to Synology Drive support on the client app for Windows or Mac or the mobile devices. There's lots of integration of that C2 space, and although it has to be said that Synology has started prioritizing C2 services in those cloud storage space and almost certainly will start rolling back on some of the lesser cloud platforms that are on that supported range of cloud services as they prioritize their own, not unlike the brand behave in that manner, I would say that's not strictly a bad thing as they continue to create their single ecosystem. I just hope they don't get rid of some of the bigger players once again, like the likes of your Backblaze back up there, because I think there are a lot of users that have got a lot of data in that space, and they're going to be less inclined to move away from it without knowing exactly what they're getting into there. Now, on the QNAP side of things, things are quite similar indeed, but with a degree of a more open nature about them. So, classic point here, when we look into their hybrid mount, their hybrid mount is effectively the QNAP alternative to hybrid share, but I will highlight that hybrid mount came out some 14 months earlier, and in hybrid mount, you're not just limited to using their own cloud space. So for example, if you do want to do that bolting on of cloud space with the appearance of localized storage and therefore allow you to take advantage of the apps that are built into your system, of course, they are going to pop their own storage space there at the top and ask you to sign in to your QNAP NAS there in the background and verify that it is connected, and then add the spaces that you've already created on the local system and on that remote system as well, and bolt them on for that localized gateway. But crucially, they're not the only ones that you can mount on there, which will allow you to create individual cloud spaces if you wish with those trusted providers and bolt them onto the NAS. This isn't necessarily a recommendation or necessarily a tick in the box for myQNAPcloud 1 storage, but I will say that at the very least that hybrid mount platform is a little bit more open than the Synology hybrid share, which is limited to their own C2 services. But once you've bolted that on, you can utilize all of the QNAP applications that you wish to use, be they for AI services, surveillance services, and more. And on the backup tools, such as Hybrid Backup Sync 3, allowing you to create backups and synchronization jobs, not unlike the Synology ones we've discussed, supporting their own cloud services, as you can see there, but also supporting all of those third-party ones. It's still yet to be seen if QNAP will start refining their cloud supported list in the way Synology has after this point, now they've invested in their cloud space. But still, nonetheless, there is still more of an open feeling of support with larger numbers of platforms supported there. Some of you may like that, some of you might not. But it means that your first-party ecosystem isn't necessarily locked in if you want to integrate or at least export onto other ones over time. And again, just like we saw with Synology, once you've integrated that cloud space, you can utilize their own local client synchronization tool, QSync, which is their alternative to Synology Drive, and bolt on that cloud storage to appear locally accessible to your connected client device users in their own native File Explorer, Mac Finder, Android File Finder, and more, all built into that there, with the storage appearing inside the Storage Manager and direct access and mounting of that storage appearing in the Storage Snapshot Manager within the system. Overall, between the two, although they've got their own proprietary apps, they both give a very similar level of integration of their first-party cloud services into the existing range of first-party tools available on both platforms. I will say things seem a little bit more polished on the Synology side, but once again, we have to give QNAP the benefit of the doubt as their cloud platform is around half a year old. Sorry, I hit the mic there. Whereas the Synology one has had several years to roll out and refine that platform. Now, we should quickly return to the subject of downloading your data from the cloud, because I really do think it is a subject that is massively overlooked when you're looking at cloud services. And in recent 12, 18 months or so, we have seen Amazon and indeed the Azure platform and some of the other third-party cloud services really hit hard on this. And this is to do with monthly downloads of your data. When you're backing up all this data to the cloud, you're doing it obviously as an insurance policy, but you're going to want to pull that data eventually, maybe for the sake of recovery, maybe for wholesale restoration. Now, depending on the amount of data you've stored on the cloud, the amount that these third-party cloud providers will charge you will differ. And they charge you for every single exchange. They do tend to have free entry policies, and as you can see there from this comparison on the Backblaze site, there are ways and means and there are offerings and services that allow you a certain degree of downloads for free. But I'm pleased to say that on both platforms, right out the gate, they generally have the policy that whatever your maximum storage capacity is, from 1 TB all the way up to 50 TB, if and when QNAP support higher capacities, straight out the gate, you can download monthly that full amount for no additional charges. If you exceed that amount, you may need to look into additional fees to be paid there. But once again, if you've got 200 terabytes on the cloud and you want to download 200 terabytes, there is no additional fees on either of these storage providers. And they both go into a little bit more detail on their FAQs about fair download policies. But more so than just being cloud services, I will say straight away that these are more than just objects in the cloud for you to access your data. They provide quite a lot of service level stuff, and both platforms do actually bring a little bit of the unique options to their own respective clouds within their own integrated applications and services and their platform. So both of them, if we go through what they've got in common, they both utilize web-based GUIs that allow you to access file folder management of your storage. They also both take advantage of full 256 level encryption on those transfers to those cloud storage providers, with multiple layers of authentication and checks going all the way through. And when using new devices or new clients are being added, all of those additional layers of verification or passwordless logins or two-step verification and more that you've already applied to your QNAP or Synology account respectively are defined here as well, with a lot of the administrative control and full access control and restrictions all in place there. Next up, they all take advantage of versioning, as we mentioned earlier on. As I look at my notes, neither one of them take advantage of those more than a month egress charges. On top of that, they've got the retention policies that you can scale to your own storage needs in case you're worried about versioning overspanning your overall capacity, and rotation controls that allow you to choose how and when you want that data to be overwritten in the cloud services. Also, both of them, when you do remove or delete data from the cloud or in your subscription, they do both use secure deletion. They state on both of their respective FAQs on the areas of storage. They don't just go ahead and start reusing that storage without a full secure erase of that data space. Finally, both of them allow, with the use of client applications, to mount the storage that you have in the object cloud storage for both platforms locally on your system. You will have to use some of the tools we've talked about today, but nevertheless, you can pass through and mount that cloud storage on your local device. You just will need a NAS in the middle in order to navigate it. You can't just use the storage space on the cloud on its own and then mount it locally without using some of their own tools and one of their own bare metal systems in the middle to interact with. You can see it in the web browser, but mounting it locally, you're going to need those individual tools. But what about unique things? They're unique selling points, the USPs of both brands. And I'll say right now, unsurprisingly, because the Synology platform has been around for longer, they've integrated far more apps and services and integrations and upgrades and extra tiers and more into their platform than QNAP. But QNAP themselves, they've not been slouches about this, and their introduction is still pretty darn good. So if we talk about, we'll get onto the subject of data center locations later on, but as you mentioned, on top of the annual cost and no individual charge for pulling that data down, it's worth highlighting that alongside integration of a hybrid backup sync, they're also working on the hybrid backup center. This is an overview tool that allows you to micromanage all of the cloud and physical bare metal systems in the local area environment. Now again, Synology have an equivalent to this, but QNAP rolling out their specific cloud-based version. Synology were talking in their 2022 to 2023 conference last year about a similar application to this, that cloud management tool. We've yet to see that fully roll out from Synology, but I think that is something we're hopefully going to be seeing next year. On top of that, the recovery into the QUTS cloud is something QNAP are quote-unquote working on, which means it's not available yet, so you have to take this with a pinch of salt, but ultimately allows you to not just see the data in a file folder manner, but also mount it within the GUI of QNAP and access the NAS in the cloud within QUTS, which a lot of you that are going to be used to the data being laid out in that way are going to find advantageous. We've already talked about the mounting of that storage and the GUI and the web-based management tools, as well as accessing the data locally, is all stuff that we talked about there, and everything else is pretty much covered in this video thus far. That's really it. The main takeaways from additional services that are integrated into the QNAP side are that coming soon hybrid backup center and that coming soon QUTS cloud mounting on a VM there on the cloud. So Good stuff, but again, we are still talking about a beta right now. Maybe we'll come back on this in 6 months to see how they compare once again. Now, on the Synology side, as mentioned, they've been around for a while. They've integrated and rolled out a lot of these. Indeed, a lot of these services, particularly Active Insight, for example, was in the beta for a very, very long time. They've had that time to keep it in the oven. Although there are lots of services here, not all of them pertain to C2 Cloud, even though they've got C2. So you've got secure transfer applications such as C2 Transfer. Then you've got C2 Identity, which is a personal identification tool. Again, QNAP have got their own equivalent of that, of a QNAP identification tool that's available for desktop devices. On top of that, you've got the object storage we talked about, and alongside traditional storage. But probably more interesting than most of these other ones is the C2 Surveillance. Technically, one could argue that you could jerry-rig something like this yourself by just synchronizing your cloud space with the NAS and then directing surveillance footage to a synced folder. But this is more than that. C2 Surveillance allows you to reduce the recording loss of your surveillance cameras in the event of vandals smashing the camera or taking stuff away or stealing the NAS, as data is being synchronized not only with the NAS but also being directly sent to their cloud storage space. Again, these are not integrated into the cloud space. You do need to pay additional charges per camera for your surveillance setup, and do bear in mind that the level of support all the way down to the level of retention, recording quality, and what you can access is all different depending on the price plan you go for. So as good as that is, and I do like that service and I have recommended it to a few, and you can try it out for free, it is worth highlighting that that is an additional service on top of the other ones we have discussed. And then you've got things like Active Insight that we've talked about. That is a management chief overview of all of the systems you have in the wild, but again, not pertaining directly to the C2 cloud space, something they're still working on, that cloud management. And the same goes for most of these. And again, if you're going to be going for the disaster recovery, if you're going to be going for the wholesale block data, there are business tiers there which are going to be priced appropriately. And overall, the big takeaway is that the Synology side, as it's been around longer, unsurprisingly, has a larger feature set overall. But the QNAP one has got some interesting stuff that are going to be rolling out, and if we return to the subject of their cloud service when it's out of beta, it's going to be very interesting to see how they directly compare, and also what QNAP's phase 2 is going to be to integrate into things like surveillance or the virtual machine area or the SaaS synchronization, such as the upgrades that they've done more recently into BoxSafe. I almost forgot to mention one of the features that Synology talked about at their recent Solutions event, that although QNAP do not list this on their site, I will say that almost certainly they will provide this service, but you've got to give Synology the benefit of the doubt. They at least talk about it, and that is the Express box. I think a lot of users would agree that when you are talking about hundreds of terabytes of data, if you don't have an active internet connection that is sufficiently fast enough, chances are that amount of restoration of data is going to take too long. That can be really negatively impactful to your business and your day-to-day operation, where time quite literally means money to you. So with this, you can actually communicate with them, and they can arrange a C2 Express box where your data will be loaded into a physical storage device and physically shipped to you. Now, obviously, this is going to be an ad hoc service, not something that's part of your membership tier, but it's still nice that they include such a system for those of you, and particularly those of you I've talked about during Zoom consultations here on the channel, that have got huge amounts of data on the other side of the world that they need transported over, and often joke that it would be cheaper to buy a new NAS, stick it on a plane in first class and ship it over. They'd get the data sooner than the loss they may have in the time to download such large amounts of data. So again, it's very good that they include this service, and although QNAP do not directly list this service from what I could see on their main pages, it is definitely something that they would entertain, and almost certainly if you contact them, it would not surprise me if this is something that could be arranged. But nevertheless, Synology do list it on their site. Now let's discuss where this data is going to live, because although to you this data is in the cloud, it still has to physically be at the data center, and depending on where that data center is in relation to you, the performance and speed you get is going to differ. Even though data is in the cloud, there is still the question of distance. If I try to download data from a data center in Australia while I'm here in the UK, I will not get the same level of speed and latency afforded to me if I was contacting a data center in London or larger parts of Europe. So both of these platforms do operate within multiple data centers across the world to benefit different users in different locations. And although they've approached the presentation slightly differently, whereas Synology here do list 3 co-location centers in Seattle, USA, Frankfurt, Germany, and Taiwan, it's worth highlighting that the QNAP side of thing, although they list 12 data center locations, I will highlight that it's actually technically 6 locations. So rather than going countries versus cities, continents versus countries. Ultimately, between the two of them, it does look overall, unless we found out more about where those co-location centers are spread out for backups and stuff like that, it looks like there's a little bit more coverage there on the QNAP side. But it's worth highlighting that they don't really detail how much of that is first-party data center, whether any of it is AWS or Azure cloud space that is occupied and utilizing there. But still, nonetheless, in terms of coverage, depending on where you are in the world, it does look like a very similar level of coverage depending on where you are. But it's worth highlighting where that coverage is more precisely and how it's laid out. It's a little bit more detailed on the QNAP side, but I just wish they went into a little bit more detail about the location. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is see just how long it takes to upload files to each of these respective cloud platforms and also what happens. So as you can see there in the background, we're conducting a very quick speed test there. In the background there, we've already got the download speed there of 260 meg and we've got 26 meg uploads. Remember, that's megabits per second there, so still some lovely speed. What we're going to be uploading first and foremost is a 1 gigabyte video file there. So that's going to be uploading a 1 gigabyte file, and then we've got around about 110 gigabytes of mixed images here, 182 files across 2 folders there, mostly image based, but there's some documents and some editing files in there as well. Let's talk about upload and download speeds. I want to upload and then download a 1 gigabyte test file, and I want to upload and download around 110 megabytes of mixed files directly up and down from either of these respective cloud platforms. Now, this is going to be a relative test, as you can see here on screen. I'm based here in the UK, and obviously the closer I am to one of these data centers, the better the performance should be in theory, and it looks like it panned out that way, with the Synology on the 1 gig test file upload taking notably longer than uploading the same file onto the QNAP cloud, perhaps due to that London-based data center access that the QNAP myQNAPcloud storage provided for me. Once again, when it came to uploading the 110 mixed files, uploading to the QNAP cloud was notably quicker. I would say even significantly quicker than what we saw with the single 1 gig file between these two platforms. The QNAP chewed through them very quickly indeed, and even though it lacks that write once read many functionality there that the Synology does, it is worth highlighting that if it came to speed and you're in the London area, between these two, the QNAP was the faster. Interestingly, when we're looking at the files inside Synology C2 object storage, we can go immediately into some of the object locking and expiry stuff that's behind that write once read many support, allowing us to configure these things right the way down to the file level if we choose to. Again, we can find out more information about these files, view some of the metadata of that file there in Synology C2 object. Now on the QNAP side of things, if we select one of those files there and go into the settings, we can go into the versioning history if we have created versions of that file that we've edited and changed over time, but we can also find out the properties there. Ultimately, it's a slightly more bare bones experience on the myQNAPcloud storage platform there compared with that of the object storage. However, 3 times wasn't the charm, and when it came to downloading the 1 gigabyte file from both of these platforms respectively, it ended up being that the Synology was quicker, not by a vast amount, but certainly quicker than downloading from the QNAP side of things. Now, how much of this pertains to my own upload and download speed versus that of the respective data centers that I'm communicating with needs to be seen and needs to be confirmed, but it has to be said that between the two of them, the QNAP did win on a 2-to-1 here when it came to the upload versus the download there. Now, how much of that again pertains to the fact that I'm communicating with the Frankfurt, Germany server on the Synology side versus that of a more local data center here on the QNAP side is yet to be seen. And there you go. Ultimately, both of these are pretty confident cloud platforms for hybrid storage with your own NAS system. Now, I'm not foolish enough to ask you which one should you choose, because let's be realistic. If you already own a Synology, you can't really use the QNAP side of things. And although I'm pretty sure you could jerry-rig the Synology cloud platform to work with your QNAP, you're not going to do so. If you're already bedded in with either of these platforms, then if you're going to go first party cloud, you haven't really got much choice. But I will say both of them are very confident steps forward, and particularly returning to what we were talking about at the beginning, the rising cost of cloud space and the idea that your data is going to be across different ecosystems. both of the Synology and QNAP platform seem to provide a huge amount of value for money in terms of operating that bare metal hybrid cloud platform. And although the Synology side of things is more graduated, more polished and more evolved thanks to the extra time that it has spent, the QNAP side does seem to have a lot of promise on what is going to be rolling out there. It's just a question of how many of those features are going to be available out of beta, how long they spend in beta, and how much engagement users are going to have with this. Because one credit I'll give to Synology in their C2 platform is they have committed to it a lot, and in the time that it's been around, I've not seen any wavering support from the brand in their C2. And although to a lot of active Synology users that has been to their detriment because they're worried about the brand going more enterprise and less SMB and home, I would still highlight that it's still a very good thing that they've rolled out the cloud and taken it that much seriously. And it's still too early to say how much commitment QNAP are going to push behind myQNAPcloud storage once it rolls out of beta. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it means we haven't got enough data to compare them directly. But what we've done today is just talk about their feature sets and why both of them, in my opinion, are definite contenders to move away from your existing third-party cloud platform. But with the QNAP one, maybe just wait until it's out of beta. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. A little bit of a change of scene here today, talking about cloud less than NAS, but there's still been some NAS, let's be honest. If you've enjoyed this, let me know in the comments. If these platforms have evolved and new features have been added, why not put a comment below for other users to read? Finally, if you need further support on your own setup, why not head over to NAScompares and take advantage of one of our many guides that we publish practically daily on that channel. On top of that, you can head over on the right hand side of every page to the free advice section, and the free advice section will allow you to not only get recommendations for forums and support platforms that will allow you to get more information and assistance on your purchase, but also you can take advantage of the free advice section. Genuinely free. It may take 3 to 5 working days for us to respond, but we do respond to every one of those. If you need something more expedited, why not head over to Ko-Fi, which will allow you to not only send an expedited 24-hour support ticket from us, or head over to the membership area where you can get access to our monthly Zooms and expedited support throughout the month. But finally, you can go ahead and hire me or Eddie for support and Zoom consultations to assist you with your setup. Finally, for further support, head over to the free NAS builder that allows you to spec up the device of your choosing. That goes down to choosing the format and the system utilization, the network connectivity and the number of users and more. And utilizing these features will allow you, for example, 6 to 10 users, backup and Plex. Go for something at 2.5 GBE, select NAS, and it will list the NASs that are compatible and best suited to your needs. And you can utilize the compare tools if you wish to compare several NASs together. Click compare on those, click compare, and it will produce a comparison chart of those NASs that you can then use to browse through and find out which one of those systems best suits your needs. It's that straightforward. Finally, why not use our Discord page or the Ask NAScompares forum for more assistance. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.